We've obviously, as you see, we have Sean online, and Nitin will also be joining us at 10:45. Nitin's one of the non-exec directors. Welcome again, Mandy Stevens, our new Chief Nursing Officer. I'm delighted to have you here with a wealth of experience and know that you will bring enormous amount to us at SPFT. And we know how vital this role is, and so delighted that you're sitting in the seat and welcome. And also, of course, like to say thank you to David, the outgoing Chief Nursing Officer, for their contributions as well. Some of you will already know that Sonia has a new role, Sonia Chandler, as the Deputy Company Secretary, and is going to be supporting the board. So congratulations and thank you. And also we have today observing Andrew and they're online, okay, and Jane. They'll be supporting us with the work around being a well-led organisation. We've heard a lot and been talking a lot about being a well-led organisation, but a reminder, it's not an aspiration, but it's something that we recognise as business as usual, and it's a regulatory inspection. And we're anticipating that CQC will be doing a well-led inspection, so we need to be prepared as an organisation. Some people will be familiar with this process. Some, including myself, won't be. So it's a really important opportunity for us to get up to speed and to know what it is that's going to be expected of us. And we've developed a roadmap which Nabil is going to be leading with Michelle Hopkins, who's recently joined us from NHS Southwest, and we've also partnered with Andrew, who brings his experience, which includes having recently supported our neighbours Kent and Medway Mental Health Foundation Trust through the well-led inspection. And Andrew's going to also be providing us with one-to-one coaching and some developmental discussions. So we are going to be prepared for this, which is really, really important. If we just do a very quick round of introductions so that Andrew knows who we are. And so if I can just start with you, Dinesh, please.
I'm Dinesh Putra, Suga Academic Psychiatrist, one of the non-exec directors.
Hi, I'm Catherine Winfield, NHS Line First Post and one of the. So my name's Lynn Hunt. I'm a non-executive director.
Hi, good morning, Mandy Stevens, Chief Nursing Officer.
Good morning, I'm Cheryl Lee. I'm one of the non-executives, and I am Culture Committee.
Good morning, Femiana Munisi, Chief Business Officer.
Morning, Andrew. Nabil Jamshed, Director of Corporate Governance. Sorry, you can't see the other side of the table. Forgive us. Camera issues. Hope you can hear us okay.
Simon Blake, Deputy Chair.
Jane Padmore, Chief Exec.
Andrew, I'm Dan. We've worked with each other previously. Good to see you again.
Hi, Conor Hicks, the Deputy Chief Exec, Chief Strategy Officer.
Abiola Opandra, I'm one of the non-execs.
Ismail Niazi, Chief Financial Officer, SPFT.
Thank you, and still one of the next.
Hi, that's another Deputy Chief.
Hi, Andrew, John Clark, Chief Operating Officer.
And today we've also got apologies from Oliver Dale, who is our Chief Medical Officer, and Claire is deputising. The Deputy Chief Medical Officer is deputising for Oliver. Can I?
Sean, got to introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry, Sean.
Sorry.
Okay. Sean Duggan, Sean Duggan, Chair, and Andrew and I had a half an hour this morning. Really welcome. It's going to be great to have him involved, and he is very committed. He's getting married tomorrow. Just thought I'd drop that in.
Congratulations. So just so you know, I've asked Nabil to kick me and Jane to pinch me if I get things wrong. So if you see me doing this, it's because I will be forgetting things like Sean to introduce himself. person in the room to introduce himself. So don't be alarmed if you see me sort of shuddering around. Do we have any declarations of interest that are not already on the agenda?
It's the same thing.
So on my declaration of interest, it says that I am the chair of the NHS Confederation Learning Disability and Neurodiversity or Autism Forum, but they have changed from the 1st of April to NHS Alliance. So it's a change in my declaration of interest, and it would apply to anybody that's got a declaration of interest for NHS Confederation or NHS providers, because they've merged to become NHS Alliance from the 1st of April.
Thank you. So, any other declarations of interest? No? Okay, so we are quorate. So can I just ask if we can go through the minutes and check that they're an accurate record? Anyone got any corrections? No? Okay, so we'll record those, and then the action on the action log has been completed. So next item on the agenda, we've got a question from members of the public. So just ask for you to note those. It's in your pack. It's a letter from Sean that was sent in response. So just for noting. Okay, Sean, over to you for the chair's report. I take it as read, but anything you want to add?
Yeah, just a couple of things, please, Simon. And firstly, sincere apologies for not being there in person. It's unavoidable, I'm afraid. And I say that because we prioritise these face-to-face meetings. They're really important for us. So do apologise. And it's Mandy's first board meeting as our new Chief Nursing Officer. So you've seen in the report that some new appointments are going to be quite crucial and influential for us. So Jonathan Montgomery, who's been appointed as our chair of the regional office. There are 7 new regional chairs now, and we have Sir Jonathan Montgomery, an academic and by background really experienced on the NHS side. I've reached out to him, of course, to get a relationship with him. And the other one is Kieran Devane, who is the NHS Alliance. So that's the new merged NHS Providers and NHS Confederation. So he's a new chief executive of NHS Alliance, and reached out to him. I know him from old, and would have invited him down. The reason why I say this is really important, because we have many challenges, great things going on, but lots of issues that we need to resolve, most of which are in our control. The ones where we need a bit of help from ICB, regional office, or NHS England and government, we need to have routes in to influence and ask questions and get people to take some of our concerns and give us some advice. And we do that by those 2 routes for sure, and others. And I think the NHS Alliance, a really very powerful membership organisation, we will continue to be very much involved with. The site visits, it's great to see that us as non-executive directors in particular are doing more site visits. The numbers are up. That's really good. We had an informal meeting as a group of non-execs recently where there's always room for improvement, some administration that we could get sorted out a bit more, and also the format of the visit, so we get the best from them, and the staff, of course, that we visit get the best from them. Delighted to continue going to some of the medical advisories committees. Clinical leadership is really important. So again, welcome Mandy. And mentioning Oliver Dale, our Chief Medical Officer, with other clinicians, authored a publication called Elephant in the Room about the new neurodiversity model involving primary care in Sussex. And this has gone down really well. And again, the reason why I mention that is with our challenges going forward, it's really important that we also concentrate on research and development and innovation. And this is a good example whereby this innovative model with primary care will reap benefits for us, and it's been published. So well done, Oliver and company. And then finally, just thanks to our committees. the Finance and Investment, Audit, New People's Committee and the Quality Committee, and to their chairs, because with the challenges that we have on the National Oversight Framework, focusing in on finance, patient flow and staff culture, the committees are doing a lot of work on this. They're taking oversight of those particular issues, and it's really, really important for us. Again, thank you, Andrew, for joining us for preparing us for a well-led review for the CQC. Our committees, the functioning of our committees will be one aspect of that they will be looking at, of course, so we can improve. So thanks very much, Simon. That's it for me.
Great. Thanks very much, Sean. Does anybody have any questions or comments on Sean's report?
I suppose there's one thing I just wanted, if that's all right. So I think Andrew's here to help us prepare for CQC well-led, and I agree with that completely. But fundamentally, he's here to help us improve in order to improve our well-led, not to prepare us, if you sort of mean. So it is about, and it's just a little bit of subtle framing of it that I think Andrew is here to hold a mirror up to us to see where we can improve, what we're doing well, what we're not doing so well, so that we are absolutely performing at our best in order to deliver great care and to deliver great outcomes for our patients. The CQC well-led inspection is sort of the burning platform that gives us a burning platform to do it now. But this is an important piece of work that we should be doing anyway. So I just wanted to make sure that we're clear that Andrew's not coming in to prepare us for a well-led inspection. He's coming in to improve our it being well-led, to increasingly make us, and because that's part of our continuous improvement journey.
Yeah.
Although I'm happy to parrot answers to questions.
Yes, right. Please don't.
I think it's a really important nuance and distinction that it is, that all of these things should be to help us improve, and the systems and the process and the regulator is just all part of that. So yeah, thank you very much, Jane. And neatly over to you.
Thank you very much. So having just heard the story, patient's story, it feels very timely that my report this month focuses on patient, carer and family experience, because for me that's one of the clearest ways to understand whether our services are working as they should do. At its simplest, I think it's about how people feel in our care, whether they're listened to, whether they're involved, or whether they're supported, particularly at moments of immense vulnerability, not just in their recovery journey, but when they're at the most vulnerable point in their life, whether they are involved in their care, whether they're supported in their care, and whether they're included in our care. And our CQC community service results, overall, I'm really pleased that we're seeing an improvement. We're closer to national average than we were, and we show and we have more areas of improvement than deterioration. But I would say that it's always it's good to see that improvement, but we can still go further. I'm not aspiring to be mediocre. I'm aspiring to be brilliant for every single patient, and every single family, until we are at a point where everybody has a good experience of our services, we should not stop trying to improve. Also seeing the positive impact of very specific approaches where clinicians on the ground have developed models of care in line with research and having a positive impact. So looking specifically in the report at the multiple admissions pathway project, which feeds into our crisis pathway and uses people's networks to actively reduce the number of bed days and involve them in the experience. We've also been awarded again our 2-star triangle of care rating, which is real progress. I want us to aspire to get 3 stars, so that will be the next level. We've had 2 stars now for a number of years. I think it's time to think, how do we get 3 stars? And that's not just about getting 3 stars, but it's the work that needs to go on underneath that to enable that 3-star status. But I want to be clear that although there's these good news bits in it, it's not consistent. And we continue to hear through complaints and through inquests that families are not always listened to, nor are they involved in care. And Mandy met a family this week who have a bereaved family this week. She very kindly met them with their consent in her first week of being here, which I thank you so much, and heard some very difficult stories about where we haven't got it right, not during care, but post their relatives' death and their experience of the investigation process. And I want to be clear, we need to learn from that, and we need to hear that, and we need to continue to hear. And the gaps between what we're achieving in some areas and the experience of other areas is the core of where we need to address things. So where there's a mismatch between what some people are saying is really good and other people are saying is really awful. So what this report does is doesn't set out a new direction. It doesn't, but it deepens the one we're already on. And our strategy to deliver great care and improve outcomes together is the right one. And it's the together bit that has to be felt in practice. And it means co-production being routine, not exceptional. It means creating a culture where concerns are heard early and not escalated late. It means continuing to build the capability for continuous quality improvement across our organisation. And I've spoken before about grounded optimism, which is a term that Dan has coined, and I'm learning a great deal about and thinking about a lot. And I think it's particularly relevant here. It's about holding hope whilst being really honest about where we're at, recognising the progress we're making, because there is progress, but also at the same time not losing sight of the gaps and being able to work on those. And I suppose that there is real progress, and we should acknowledge that, but we also need to stay very honest about where this isn't being delivered consistently, and maintain that focus. For me, it's not about quick fixes. We're not going to have some magic bullet that we're going to do tomorrow and then next quarter everything's going to be wonderful and amazing. But it's about staying very true and honest to the vision that we've set and the strategy we've set, and delivering it constantly and consistently. And it's about being supported by the right systems, the right leaderships, the right behaviours. So overall for the board, my position is we're on the right trajectory. We're seeking evidence of improvement. We're seeing evidence of improvement, but consistency of experience remains our central challenge, and that's where our focus needs to be.
Very much, Jane. Cheryl, you want to come in after?
Yes.
Should we take questions first, or did you want to?
I can come in and maybe part of what I will say might.
Okay.
Maybe. I don't know.
It's not on equal side.
It's on equal side.
So I felt that the response to the community health survey was sort of really welcome news amongst a sea of kind of difficult messaging, actually, and difficult data. I was a bit concerned about the response rate at 18%, because that's kind of fewer than 1 in 5 of our people responding. But I wondered just how that compared and whether there's a plan to improve the response rate next year.
So,
I'm assuming it's annual.
Come in, because you know.
We're kind of middle of the pack. Most mental health trusts tend to be around that area. One of the things we have done is increase the sample size. So we're required to take a sample of 1,250 service users. We've increased that sample to 5,000 because we wanted to use this as an opportunity to get more data. Yeah. But we're continuously thinking, how can we improve that response rate?
I'd have to check. I think last year we were 11%. So I think it's an improvement in last year. Was it 11?
No, it's around about the same.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I misspoke.
But the increased sample size gives significant shifts, doesn't it?
There's something about the challenge we set ourselves as a board, going forward. But I think we should congratulate the staff that are involved in this, because actually it is good news. Yeah.
You want to come in?
On another point.
On another point. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. But do you want to?
No, I just wanted to, following on from Jane's point, to speak to what many of us know, which is the direct link between patient outcomes and experience, and staff experience and organizational culture. And one of the things that we will see through the rest of the morning is the impact, and we will talk about emotional resilience and staff and the morale, staff morale as a result of all the organizational change. But what gives us confidence is how explicitly we are shaping our work around leadership, well-being, and our engagement priorities, as opposed to having it sit as an unspoken backdrop. Now, one of the things I wanted to just talk about practically, when we talk about culture through the rest of the day, you're looking at culture through three lenses. So one being the behaviors, what happens day to day, especially under pressure. Another being the language, how staff talk about the experience, but also how we as leaders hold the space for that, i.e. how we interpret that, how we speak back into it, and how we hold the balance for, as you said, Cheryl, just now, the positive, but also the things that are of concern. And the third bit is the signs and the signals, i.e. what symbolically are we doing to visibly show what our priorities are. So like, which is what Jane just did, talking about the strategy, staying on focus, through our actions, our governance, and what we're investing in. And as we speak through the course of the day, I will want to speak to some of those things around what we're doing on our staff survey, our work on our leadership, the work we're doing in terms of what we're investing in and how we're prioritizing things, and on our well-being. So I just wanted to link those because it's going to be really important when we talk about organizational culture and some of those topical things like safer staffing, the bath. As we think about those, I'll be bringing those things in through the course of a meeting today. So I just thought I'll say that.
Thank you. Great, thanks for me. Kathy.
Slightly off the topic of the talk, which was going to be next to the Dash review of safety. Of course, it's been announced this week that Dash is going to be on the mental health. And I just wondered if you've got.
Kathy, can you just speak up?
I don't think. I can't hear either.
Just be the HSJ.
So yeah, no, I'm trying to think. So because I have been to a meeting, but I don't know how much was Chatham House rules and how much wasn't. So that's why I'm being hesitant. So I suppose what I would say is I know that Penny Dash and her approach very much fits with our model of quality here, in that she talks about the three legs of the stool of quality being safety, effectiveness, and experience, not quality and safety, but it being the three. And then she also talks about the Durand trilogy of quality planning, quality assurance, and quality controls. So I think that what the board has signed up to, our approach to quality, fits with what I know is Penny Dash's view of what quality is and quality, the way forward in quality is. So I think we're well aligned. I think the wider conversation about what was in the HSJ is probably not, maybe talk about that outside of here, if that's right.
Thanks. Dan, Abiola, then Anil.
I just wanted to build on your point, Jane, about hearing critical experience. It's so powerful if we're prepared to listen in a way that's non-defensive and if we're committed to act. So just a couple of examples about where we're trying to be better at doing that. One, our complaints process, as Jane's highlighted in the paper. Our improvement journey over the last 2 years has been about trying to move that from a transactional process to one that's about a tool for learning and improvement. We're not there yet, but we've made really big strides in taking it in that direction. The other area where we've been poor at historically is looking at experience data in isolation and in separate data silos. So I'm really excited. Just last week, we started the testing phase for the new AI tool called Quail that's going to enable us to do that. And what that tool gives us the ability to do is to look at experience data from complaints and data from incidents, look at it at a divisional level and at a clinical team level to identify themes, hotspots and areas where we need to take action. So it's just an example of how we need to be continuously looking at new ways to learn from experience.
And how much power do we have to set that system? Because actually what you really want to do is overlay your staff survey results with those incidents and complaints. So you've got that patient and staff experience to see what triangulation you can do then. So
we're a very early adopter of a new system. So this is a tool that was first deployed in Buckinghamshire Acute Trust about a couple of years ago now. We're one of the first trusts to be adopting it, but absolutely that would be the place we'd want to get to, where we're bringing in that staff data as well.
So maybe that's a challenge that we set for you then.
I'll happily accept that.
Given it's AI, by its very nature, doesn't live, sleep and breathe like me in the past. The data inputs could be voluminous, couldn't they? So I'm just picking up the next steps. Can't we do that immediately? Am I missing something in terms of not just but our feedback annually, pulse surveys, ET, freedom to speak up? It can all go presumably on day one.
It's a bit more challenging than that because it's a relatively new system and we're an early adopter. The testing phase we're in the middle of right now is about getting the data in the right place with a focus on incidents and complaints. That in itself is quite a technical challenge, but we absolutely would want to get to that point where we're bringing in the staff experience data as well.
I suppose it would be very simple if everything was on the same system. It's not. There are multiple software underneath it all, which makes it complicated and a much bigger task than would logically make you think it is. So we start with one, but I think absolutely we need to set our sights high, and that's the journey we go on. But I'd rather get it right for the first bit first and then add as we go on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just really like the fact that Jane's report does cover carers and families, because I think that is such an important part, of what we do. But I think I just want to push us a little bit to think a little bit deeper about that. So I love the work that's been done with the project, with the MAP project, and we can see that we must have the policies in place for some of this because we are seeing examples of good things happening. But the fact that it's not consistent across the board, despite having the policies and systems in place, suggests more of a cultural thing, or that we need to do something more to improve staff behaviour so that it becomes something that they naturally want to do and are not just doing. Some people doing it because they just happen to be good. They just happen to feel it, and other people not doing it. Sorry?
Because their boss is watching.
Maybe, or if their boss is watching. So I just would push us to what else do we think that we can do to start making it more consistent, and not just doing. I saw the project, which I think is great, but then to me that's kind of retrospective and kind of let's look at who we've done this for. Are there, there wasn't anything in the paper, maybe the stuff that is going on, where we are changing the mindset of our staff so that they are including families all the time as is.
So it's implicit in the report in that the triangle of care is all about that. It's about a whole system and a whole trust approach. And if we can let you have the evaluation, because it's a multiple page report of where it's happening consistently across the trust. I've picked out one project as an example because it fits with the UEC pathway, which I know is a priority for the board, and therefore I've picked that one out as an example. As a chief exec's report, I can't do everything. That should be coming through the quality committee. So there's something about how we at the quality committee make sure that the assurance about the more systemic approach and the approach we're taking to improve it to carer and service user involvement is in there. I think what I'm trying to do in the chief exec's report is give a high level strategic direction rather than assurance. So
I can understand that, because I saw where you had put the carers conference. I'm imagining there will also be staff conference, things like that as well.
So just checking, we've got an action which is about ensuring that the quality committee picks up that in more detail. Yeah, great. Dan, you wanted to come in, then Colin.
Yeah, just briefly to your point, Abiola, if Oliver was here, he would be nodding his head to your point about culture. And I know he feels really strongly as Caldecott Guardian. We obviously have to observe people's rights to confidentiality, but he feels that there are times within our teams when we can be a little too guarded and a little too risk averse in a way that can make carers and families feel shut out. So we're working with a group of carers and families on a couple of events which we're going to be holding this year to explore that kind of issue.
Well, is yours on the same point, or?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's just I guess it's a footnote into the item around the plan that's coming up in a couple of items' time, because in there you'll see very explicitly we have a 5-year strategic ambition, and very deliberately it's about patient care and family experience and involvement. And then you'll see what we're setting as an exec team for the board to agree today as being the in-year objective. So it's not the totality of that, but I just think there's something about tying this back into what we're saying we're going to deliver as our strategic priorities this year.
Thanks, good. Anil.
Quick observation of the question, if I could, the observation, I agree entirely with.
Can you speak up a bit, Anil? Can you just speak up a bit?
I
Sorry.
usually don't have that issue. Trying to do better. With all that you've said, Funny, and indeed your application, Dan, my question relates to productivity. But on the last occasion, you quite rightly, again in your paper, reassert our commitment to quality. The last occasion we were here as a board, I asked the question around current service architecture, our transformation ambitions, seen through the lens of productivity. I think it was Oliver that answered, and John. And if I remember rightly, Oliver referenced the work of, in East London Trust, Make the Stage, 12-Hour Wait, and the importance of seeing through things not simply through a financial but a clinical and quality lens. I agree with that entirely. At the same time, productivity is our greatest lever to ensure that we can live within our means. It's trite, but it's true. With that in mind, the minutes remind me that we have identified service line reporting that will support a more forensic, data-driven approach to drive improvements in teams where activity falls behind. So it's that I want to focus on through the lens of productivity. What is that data telling us? Where, if anywhere, are productivity bottlenecks? And what specifically are we doing to address those productivity bottlenecks? One little question on productivity. You did tell me to speak up.
Yes, no, speak up. I'm going to hand over to, so this is built into our plan for next year. So I'll hand over to Usman at this stage, and maybe Colin might want to come in, sir.
So I think we'll cover this off in a bit more detail when we talk about 26-27 annual plan. So I won't sort of repeat it. I guess where we've got to with the service line reporting, it has clearly identified those areas where there appears to be a mismatch between the level of activity, income, and cost incurred. I'm being slightly hesitant because I think it's probably not fair to go into that in this public forum without having a contribution. That's the basis on how we are trying to identify where we prioritise productivity improvement. And what I would say is that the trust is delivered and combined now. Over the last 2 years, our productivity cost-weighted activities increased, costs have gone down, and we're doing more work in effect. So, and that's on the national benchmarks that have been produced that were issued. I think we're actually on HSJ. So I think the work we've been doing on productivity, we can tangibly demonstrate there. In terms of the service line reporting, we absolutely know those specific areas where we go, but we're now working because I think with service line reporting, having done this for a long time now, is that for us it's relatively new. It's been difficult for quite a long time. One of my vivid experience of this, there is no point just issuing that out and assuming it's right. So what we're doing is working with the teams and being curious and saying, why does it appear that activity is here, but your cost base is up here? Are we missing something, or is there something that hasn't been considered? once I think we're clearer about that, we're then saying, okay, now that we've grounded all of that and set up realistic assumptions, this is what the target is like. How do we do it? And I think the track record over the last 2 years has been, we have improved our productivity. So that actually when we set realistic plans based on sort of evidence data, we deliver.
Colin.
Yeah, so again, a reference, it will come back in. I also think there's something for us as a board to just think about our use of language and how our staff hear our use of language around productivity, particularly, because what we can't have our staff hearing us saying you're being more or less productive, because that implies you're working, or that what will be heard is a sense of you're working harder or less hard than other teams. Actually, I have yet to visit any service in any NHS organisations where people are working exceptional hours. So for me, I think there's always, and I think there's a translation piece around how we take this conversation into a national forum, and then how we translate the conversation down to our teams, where ultimately what we're talking about is how are we helping our staff to have the time to do what I would term the high value activity, the stuff that they've been trained for, the stuff that they're passionate about, which is ultimately about patient care, which we can quantify as being clinical contacts, as opposed to engaging in a huge amount of what they would deem low value activity, which would be form filling, mandatory training, moving between multiple different templates and documents, completing on audits that they don't see add value. So I think for me, there's just a caution as a board around how we navigate the language associated with productivity so that it hits the sort of the national expectation piece. But what we're not conveying any messages is around people who work harder or less hard than each other. And I think we've got to be really careful about how we kind of sort of navigate that, because we absolutely can't give messages out that we have staff that are working harder or less harder than each other, because they're working phenomenally.
Kathy, is yours on the same point? Because John wants. Okay.
Service quality. And I suppose I'm really keen to ensure that as we implement our CQI, some of the things that we know are the right things to do in terms of outcome and productivity, that we're pulling those levers harder. So we know about MAP, we know about open dialogue, we know about change our model of enhanced observation, and how do we get transformation scale? Because I see us sometimes get to the edge of something and pull back, or not scaling it consistently across the organisation. It's contingent on a few enthusiastic bright sparks having to go above and beyond, rather than the organisation's got behind something and is really pushing and driving it. So I'll probably say quite a bit more about that in part 2 when we come to some of the papers around FRP and staffing establishments. This is a really interesting dichotomy of balancing that triangle between finance, workforce and money now. And I think we'll really have a useful discussion this afternoon.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Kathy. John, this last comment, and then I'm going to give Jane to sum up. We need to move on.
Just mentioned that it's in the 26-27 plan. We have talked about productivity here before, and I wouldn't want us to walk away from here thinking this is not a line conversation of the we do now. I think your question is, what does the data tell us and what are we doing about it? I'm paraphrasing. One of the key areas, I think, is obviously work we've been describing around the mental state over the last sort of 6 to 9 months, absolutely driven by our attention to where is the unconscious variation, where's our area of focus, what can we do about it, how can we make an improvement, which in effect is a significant productivity gain. I know we're not going to go on that, but we know when we look at our service load, look at whole time equivalent, contact per whole time equivalent, with all the caveats that we've discussed before. CAM services is an area that we don't benchmark brilliantly well, so that is one of the focuses through the CAM's transformation piece. Talking therapies is an area where I think we have some real expertise in the organisation around productivity because of the way that they're commissioned, because of the clinical model of those services. It is an area where we think we can apply some of those approaches internally. I guess the final thing I would say is system-wide. So our new clinical information system, whilst it comes with challenges, this does give us an opportunity to have far better activity and better understanding of our activity, because that's some of the challenges. We have data quality and that, but this will be able to get out from it more. I don't want to suggest it's all data quality, that's not the case, but there is a real issue with just the way that people record activity, and I suspect underselling what they're doing.
Great.
We'll talk about maps in the next piece, but I guess my only final caveat, maps are very small service. I think James used it as a good example of something we're doing, but your point is well made, Catherine, about how we expand things, and that's in part resource driven rather than result from unwillingness.
I think the thing which is important to pick up just between these two conversations about the language you use is one, it's referring to systems, and actually productivity is often felt as an individual issue when we're talking about improving system structures, making it easy for people to be able to do their jobs, etc., through transformation. So yeah, really important. Jane.
So one of the things that I think might be helpful is not at the next board, but at August board, when we've had the data cleansing from the new system 1 coming in, is have the chief exec's report about productivity that gives us sort of an overview and a sort of a whole strategic view of what it is, because at that point we'll have more data and we'll have a better understanding, because until we get that better understanding, we can't give a coherent narrative based in the data. So if you're happy, then I'll do the chief exec's report on productivity in August.
It wasn't the finance committee set up this.
No, that's fine.
Thanks very much, Jane. And as ever, thank you for a good overview of an area of work, which is really helpful for us. Okay, Nabil, onto the board assurance framework. And again, just before handing over, I just think this is a bit of the work which just we keep seeing improvements and the connectivity into the rest of the work. So thank you to you, but to everybody for making make it feel like it is important to improve, not just as a process, which sometimes these things can feel like they really are. So, Nabil.
Thank you very much indeed. So I think with the board, I'd like to do 2 or 3 things, if I may. I think firstly, just drawing out the key components of what it is, because I think we just need to get ourselves familiar with what I call the facelift of the board assurance framework, what we had previously, then go into a little bit more about what it's telling us in terms of its contents and context where it's been, and then draw out the connectivity with the corporate risk register, if I may. I'll do that quite quickly, hopefully in 10 minutes, to give you that time back, Chair, if that's okay. I think the first thing to say is I think kudos to the committees who have well received the BAF and gone through the movement in it to what it has been through. So when we look at now BAF, how it is presented, it is now clearly presented with some really good looking and easy to understand risk matrices alongside heat maps, alongside graphic details that explains on a page what it is that we're looking for. I'll come to Appendix 1 in a bit, but I think that's where the key focus is, to think about what is our risk profile as an organization in terms of delivering our strategy. This is all about strategy. And I think one of the key movement, Chair, you might not have seen, but all the committees now receive the board assurance framework as the first item at their meetings. And that kicks us off in terms of that direction for delivering and assuring all the agendas are aligned. We've had internal audit recently completed on our board assurance framework, and I'm pleased to say we have received reasonable assurance with some strengthening ideas to further work on that, which is, I think, a really great place to be in, remembering we've just been on this journey only since November. So it's a really good place to be in that phase, I think, and that gives us good assurance towards our annual reporting structures and when we come to do our annual report. In terms of what this report tells us is that we're more or less on track with overall risk profiling of where the organization is. It shows movement on particular risks that we have. So if you look at the heat map, which is in the main report, what you see on that heat map is you have risk profiling of the organization is somewhat between your middle ground of red and amber. It's not all red, it's not all amber, it's not all green either. And that just shows and correlates with our journey in our board assurance framework that we started this only back in December, and it's progressing well as we go through. The more important element is further down when we look at the target risk score for all of those risks we have on capability leadership, capacity, partnership integration, continuous improvement, digital, states, financial sustainability, governance, and quality. What we see is the target risk scores are almost helpful way for us to think about our trajectory. Our trajectory tells us that we are going to move into amber rating, and that is based upon the controls that we have in place and the assurances that are seen through the committees. The committees test those assurances quite at length, quite at detail, to ensure that we are tracking those risks properly. What we do know is, yes, there is some more work to be done in some of those risks, especially I think Fumi was talking earlier about the cultural aspects. We know that is our continuous risk that we are tracking, ensuring delivery. We have some assurances in that, but there's some partial assurances, which brings us to do more work on those. And that remains the core part of the work we need to do as an organisation, and continuous quality improvement becomes our vehicle to deliver that aim. So that tells that story is quite coherent from the board assurance framework that we have in front of us. In terms of our assurance ratings, further down in the main report, you see the calculated scores. So it's quite interesting, actually. The system we've got allows us automatically to calculate the risks and the scoring behind the scenes. So as an executive, for example, if Usman was to go into a BAF risk and say, I've updated my action and my action is this, the system will determine the scoring within that, and we give our score. It's quite interesting to see. It's quite balanced position in that way. It shows us, again, that movement, that trajectory. We were more in red. We are now more in amber and yellow, progressing towards more green as this progresses throughout the cycle of delivery of a strategy. So it's not all good news story, by the way. We are saying is we recognize improvements, we recognize the journey, more work to be done. So that's the kind of the bottom overall picture of the BAF. What I do want to do is just spend a few minutes on the visual presentation of the BAF, which is in the appendices. When you look at Appendix 1, the first thing you see is a kind of a very brief overall summary of our strategic risks listed down where they are, and it gives us the risk appetite for each of those risks where we are. So when we look at all of those risks on the right-hand side of that top table, you will see which of the risks are within risk appetite and which are the one and which are below and which are above. To highlight and bring to the board's attention, the risk relating to financial sustainability is above risk appetite, and the quality is also above the risk appetite. So that's the point to note. But again, it's a reflection of our position, and our trajectory is towards moving and bring it down to within our risk appetite by the actions we have in place and progressing that through. When you look at our controls assurance piece, which is just the tables below, that explains the controls are showing a lot in yellow. So it's a kind of a 50-50 split, a lot in amber, very few in red and a couple in green, which is really good news story again, seeing that actions have fulfilled its role and it has completed to result in an outcome. So it's not only saying actions have been completed, it's saying that action has resulted in a change in the organization. When we look at the residual and the actions we need to do further, the good news is none of them are in red, which means execs are on track and committees are tracking those through. They all are in amber, which means they are tracking to its delivery. Some turn into green, again shows that assurance that progress has been made. The last thing I want to do is on the page below, it gives us a kind of one-page view of our organization's board assurance framework and where the risks are. So looking at that by committee view, you see the first tab, and that shows how many risk board of directors are holding, each of the committees holding, and the level of them. So for example, if you look at finance committee, it's holding 3 risks, 2 of them in amber, 1 in red, and so forth. That explains that position to give us the profiling of risk. As it changes, we will see progress being made here. When we look at by our BAF objectives, delivering high quality consistency care, be a good partner, employer of choice, etc. Again, that is mapped to our strategic objectives on the right hand side, and that can show a good progress to say where we are. I think the last thing I want to draw out is in terms of the bottom below of it, is about our risk appetite. So our risk appetite currently stands at 2 of the BAF risks are on cautious risk appetite, 3 of them are open, 2 of them on mature, 1 in green, in amber, and another one on mature as well, in amber as well. Further down, you see the full details of the BAF, and that gives you the full story of where we are with full details that have been updated. I just want to pause there and just say a big thank you to my exec colleagues and the committees for helping us to get to where we have got to. So I just want to pause there, Chair. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. Lynn.
I just want to say something back, I think, to Nabil and his team, because I found as the chair of a subcommittee when this was being introduced and talked about, it was kind of, I was a bit wobbly about it. But actually, it's the best system that I've ever worked with in terms of that live speech that you have in the committee. Where do we sit? What do we need to update? What do we need to do differently? How do we need to report this? What does it mean for us? And I think when you've got that very live discussion going on, all of the things that you might sometimes get pushed to the bottom don't, because they're live things to talk about. And I think particularly with quality and safety, they are incredibly important to our patients and their families and our staff. And I just want to thank Nabil really for pressing ahead with the doubters, and I'll say I was one of them at the beginning, and I've been absolutely transformed by this process.
Good. Great, thank you very much, Colin. Dan. Colin was
Sound
there.
like Colin.
Interchange.
Just one point on the risk relating to culture and staff experience that Fumi spoke to earlier, because that's obviously a really important area of focus for us right now. And our approach to communications and engagement is a critical part of that response. So timely information, two-way engagement, early engagement with people on difficult issues, celebrating success, all of those things and more. I brought a paper on this to the exec committee on Tuesday, and it's one of the issues we're going to be exploring with the board at our May workshop. So I just wanted to give a bit of a trailer for that one.
Great, thank you. We've got 4 people and we're close to time. So from me, Anil, Cheryl, and then Sean. Brief, please.
This will be super brief. So, as risk owner for this, I am comfortable that the path accurately reflects where we are. I don't think it's a risk that is hidden or overstated, and I think it's important to reflect that balance of the challenges that we currently have, because it's important to be able to speak truthfully to those issues. But and we will come to this in the annual plan, so there's a trailer for that then clearly demonstrates the plans and the activities that we have to deliver to those things. And for the 7 controls that we have, I'm expecting 2 of them to come off by the end of will come off by the end of the financial year, by the end of March. So we will see movement of those in the next quarter.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. For me, Anil.
Sure. Agree. Give me an observation, 2 questions. The observation is echoes what you said helpfully, Lynn. I think what you brought to life in a living, breathing way, you, your team and others, what can at first blush appear an arid area of thought. So thank you, not just for what you've done, but the way you've gone about it. It will serve this trust extremely well over time. 2 questions, if I could. Under paragraph 8 of the paper, strategic risk deep dive capability, leadership and skills, you say this: residual exposure remains high due to ongoing workforce fragility, variation in leadership capacity and time. In your estimation, as yet do we possess the clarity around accountability and ownership of actions that you'd hope to see?
I'll respond briefly and invite Fumi, if I may. I think from the governance side, which is not only the mechanical side, but more aspirational side and the cultural change, I think one thing we will come to later at the board paper is around re-looking at our governance, and the introduction of the People Committee will allow us to have absolute focus and laser light on this issue of delivering what we need to deliver. The assurances are through, of course, working through the actions, looking at the controls. So from my estimation, to what I've seen, I am confident those actions are deliverable within the timeframes they're set, and we are progressing in the right direction. When you look at the details when it comes to the People Committee risks, which were presented to the Quality Committee last time, Lynn will recall, we also present an SPC chart that shows us tracking to where the risks are. So that particular risk map 002 is showing a downward trajectory, which is a positive news, showing and confirming my estimation. Or to Fumi for anything else to add.
What he said, but it's just No, just to add to that, to say that in my view, we look at things like this from a capacity, capability, and then the framework within which it exists point of view. So capacity is, do we have the right capacity to drive all of the work that we need to do to get us to the point we're saying we want to get to by the end of this? And the answer is saying in the direction of travel in our annual plan, i.e. what are we prioritizing? So what I will always say here is, as long as we're able to stick to what we prioritized and we commit the resources to what we have prioritized, then we can deliver on releasing the capacity to do the things that we need to do to get us to where we need to get to. And with regard to capability, that is how we enable the workforce to create the conditions that then supports all the things we want to do. And we do that through the programs that we have in place, again, which we'll see in the people section of the report.
Your preparing my second question. A couple of colleagues orientate themselves on looking at the risk register, and it's risk 11767, timely ADHD medication reviews. Sean, as our chair, kindly recently shared a report or a paper from the Journal of Psychiatry. I know Oliver was one of them, and I'm praising certain parts, and part it said this: inadequately supported neurodivergent individuals have heightened vulnerability to psychiatric and physical needs. Neurodivergence complicates clinical trajectories, particularly if care is misattuned. With that acting as the backdrop, we, in terms of where we are with timely medication reviews, we're unable to book in timely assessments with medics. Queries that require medic input are not responded to. I'm reading this out of the basin from the papers, responded to in a timely manner. My question, if I could then, given the very serious potential sequelae, what would it take to adequately address this issue, in your estimation, and what is the impediment currently that's in the way?
Sorry, is this clever?
Yes, yeah.
So in terms of the challenges of treating divergence, our services are getting better at being. In terms of medic capacity, which I think is what you're mainly asking about for medication reviews, I think the bulk of our community patients sit within MHTs now, as launched in December. The way of working with the medics will be changing, but it's a cultural change for the medics to get from where they were before, which was medics sitting in a room with a booked clinic, just seeing lots of patients. That is not necessarily the most effective way to use our medics. We should all be directing care for a wide range of people. They could do that through liaising with the rest of the team and through good relationships with the GP partners and with our intensive partners, so CGL and if we move to a newer model of how we use our medics, this problem will gradually resolve itself, because the medics will not be sitting in a clinic with 10 people every clinic. It will be a smart model. So the person who needs the urgent medication will be able to, there will be capacity for that person to be. The other thing that will improve our medical capacity is that training places where it's happening for our trainees. I mean, our education can talk about that more than I can. And we are making some gains in our recruitment of substantive consultants. Both of those things, more substantive consultants, you have more trainees, you have overall, and we're growing the next generation of consultants who will again resolve our recruitment issues. There are incremental quality gains by having substantive. And they work incredibly hard, don't get me wrong, but substantive consultants are preferred.
I'm really conscious of time, so I think what we're hearing is that there is work in practice, and perhaps something we can follow up separately, Colin. Otherwise, you're not going to have any time for annual plan. If there's anything else that we need to pick up, but it's an important point, and some perhaps one we can come back to. Cheryl, very quick.
Yeah, of course. So I think the paper's great. I'm not quite where Lynn is on my own journey of learning. But I think also we rarely disagree with each other in the board. And this is a moment where I'm going to disagree with Funmi, because my worry about the calculated risk, for example, around staff experience and engagement, giving us reasonable assurance, I'm just not sure we're there. Because actually our staff survey results and our sickness levels, they don't indicate actually that we're in a good place from a staff experience and engagement perspective. And I just wonder if that's too high. Now, some of that might be that we're moving from a quality committee into a people committee, and there'll be opportunity for additional scrutiny, as it were. But I just feel that sometimes we're really agreeable around this table.
Noted. And I think rather than us try to answer it now, I think it's something that we should take and think about in relation to people committee. But I think it's a really, really important point, and that we shouldn't be afraid to disagree.
I'm afraid, by the way.
Okay, even when we're afraid, we should step forward and disagree, because it's an important point. Yeah, important way. There's a board that sits and agrees with each other. Is never going to be as effective as possible. So thank you for saying it, and let's pick it up in through the people committee and come back.
Simon and Neil never agree with me.
Sean.
The comment I want to make is about the actual BAF and the level of understanding, the maturity with us as a unified board in accepting, understanding and working on the BAF. If you needed any evidence as to the improvements we've made that Lynn was articulating earlier, 2 years ago when I came, the level of discussion, debate, that last one, the disagreement with Shell, spot on. That level is unrecognisable 2 years ago. So we really have matured, and that we should acknowledge that, and I appreciate all the work that Bill and others have done to that. It's now all about maintaining it. And I'm sure Andrew won't mind, who's observing the board today, but he said to me earlier, in terms of external organisations looking in on our well-led measurement, this is by far the most important document. So it needs to be alive, and it needs to have the attention that we've given it. Thank you, Simon.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Sean. Okay, I'm going to draw a line under that for now, but thank you. I think you can see, it's still work in progress. It will keep getting better, but it's absolutely, really, really important document. So thank you, Bill. Colin.
Thank you, Chair. So the next item people will see will be the 2026-27 sort of annual plan. And I guess just to kind of caveat where it's kind of come from to come to this. So obviously, we previously had some board engagement sessions where we've talked about some of the draft strategic objectives, some of the kind of financial plans and how that link into our organisational programmes. We had the session with the Council of Governors, and then internally we've also done work with both our senior leadership team and our trust management executive as well. So this isn't landing cold in a way where we haven't had sort of strong engagement. And also it features the sort of, I guess, the ongoing work that we're doing with KPMG as our delivery partner around sort of continuous quality improvement. So we had our first attempt at catchballing with our divisions around our strategic objectives last week. And I think it's probably fair to say that it was a really high energy, constructive session. But as execs, I think we've got a bit of coaching to be done in terms of some of our styles of behaviours, which was really helpful because it was a really honest reflection for us. Just in terms of the kind of key highlights, so what you won't see in here is a huge amount of detail associated with the finance and the workforce returns that we have previously signed off. That's quite deliberate because I'm trying not to make this document a massive great thesis. Obviously, if you've got that information elsewhere, if we need to reverse, if people want access to it again, please just let me know. Other than just a signpost in here about our commitment to achieve both the in-year break-even position and then also the specific kind of workforce targets that we've been set by and agreed with NHS England. Just in terms of sort of, I'll just signpost a couple of slides and then open it up. So I guess just in terms of slide 4, so very specifically what we're thinking about is the delivery being sort of within 3 buckets, for want of a better way of putting it. So what are our core strategic objectives for the year ahead? So these are our in-year sort of delivery objectives, quantifiable, that we have catchballed, negotiated with our divisional teams in terms of how they will then be responsible for taking forward and delivering those as the kind of key priorities. What are the big organisational programmes of work that we need to collectively get around? So the trans directorate stuff that needs support to deliver. And I know we've had some conversations around, even though we've streamlined them down, actually there's a hell of a lot still in there. And part of that is about being able to deliver the financial plans and the commissioning mechanics, meaning that the way that we can do that at times is quite challenged. And then what are we doing around those longer term strategic initiatives, the kind of more cultural embedded piece? The strategic initiatives then remain focused around 4 key areas. So digital being one. So actually, how do we think about developing and embedding data, digital technologies and innovations? We've got a session tomorrow to really think about drawing out that draw breath at that post initial EPR implementation. What does that look like within the organisation? And how do we match people's confidences, capabilities with the technological abilities that we now have as an organisation? Suicide prevention obviously absolutely remains fully up there. And then obviously we've got the leadership culture and development, which we've been touching on through the conversation so far, and obviously the rollout of continuous quality improvement. I guess the main slide I just wanted to draw people's attention to was slide 8. So this is where we've got these strategic objectives for 26-27. We were heavily charged by KPMG through some of the coaching sessions that we've had that optimally you do not want more than 5 to 7 of these. So as you can imagine, as an exec team, we managed to put in about 25 to start with, because we all have our areas of focus and priority, and worked really hard to think about how do we make this more manageable. The one thing that came out of our staff survey all the way through has been around overloaded, too many priorities. So how do we start to really exercise discipline and challenge? And I think it's an ongoing piece. I think helpfully it plays into a lot of the conversation that we've had so far. So these are the in-year objectives around. So there's one specifically around self-harm. So focusing on reducing the number of self-harming incidents. We've talked about the balance of not wanting to drive reporting underground. So how do we have a culture of openness and reporting, but actually what we're wanting to see is demonstrable change. You have the things around obviously reducing the length of stay, which fits with our existing UEC and inpatient work stream, the Morehouse work and the agreements. You've got productivity in there, and we're just in the process of just finalising this week the context for whole time equivalents. As you can imagine, it's very challenging when we think about the variety of different teams. You can't come up with one target for everyone. So there's some work going on around what are we setting as targets for our community teams as opposed to our crisis teams, as opposed to our CAM services. Waiting times is in there. Zero waiting time breaches, 52 weeks for adults and older adults. And for children to bring the breaches down to under 104 weeks, in line with a lot of the national guidance. The exclusion to that being around the CAMS neuro piece, which I'll touch on. And then really thinking about staff sickness, patient-imported outcome measures, and then really focusing on that parent, carer and family involvement. So those were identified as being the top 7 strategic objectives for the year. The rest of the slide deck then talks about what are the organisational programmes and projects that sit underneath it. I will make a play back to the previous conversation about within the adult community programme, we've got that new partnership, colleagues may remember, with primary care, around us supporting primary care to be able to offer a diagnostic and medical intervention service for people with ADHD. Really, really pleased to say that has launched ahead of schedule, all 3 pilots, so Brighton and Hove, Crawley, Hastings. And I think as of this week already, we've had at least 50 people go through that for assessments. Now, I know 50 out of a very long waiting list is a lot, but it's a really fantastic start. And also for me, it's the first time we've done something so in partnership with primary care. So I'm really, really proud of the team, but that sits within one of the programmes itself. I won't go through any more of the detail because I think it's predominantly just a summary of previous conversations we've had, but happy to take any comments, feedback.
Great, thank you. Really, really clear, Colin. Just before I open it up, can I just check in terms of who will see this document? Who will it go to staff? So just on your conversation earlier about productivity, is there a way that we need to just think about that block? And how you do that. Colin, oh Dan, sorry.
We are in strategy and comms work hand in hand. Just to Colin's point about the change challenge we face, the sheer amount of it we've been undertaking and are going to be undertaking, That's something we're deeply cognizant of. And one of the things we need to avoid is falling into that trap of viewing change as a technical, rational, linear, logical process. We need to pay attention, because this is what the staff survey tells us, to the emotional impact of change and how we manage that. And that includes reflecting on how we as a board and as an exec team lead change. We had a really good session as a senior leadership team last month, where we spent a couple of good hours doing that. And I think that was time really well spent, because unless we reflect as a senior leadership team about how well we do change, we're at risk of repeating the same mistakes in future.
Thanks, Dan. Lynn.
Ask a question on the back of that bit that's kind of standing out for me today, and is when you had that conversation, did you have the opportunity to discuss what kind of leaders you wanted to be and we want the board to be? I'm going back over my questions again, but did that come up at all? What kind of model, what kind of leadership are you, and what kind of leadership does this board offer to our staff?
So I guess two thoughts on that. One, and Femi may want to say more, it led us, I think, into a really helpful discussion as a senior leadership team about how we lead it and about how we pay attention to that emotional impact of change. There's a broader issue for us as a board, which touches on the strategic comms and engagement paper I mentioned earlier, and that's something that it would be really good to explore at the May workshop.
Yeah.
Yeah, really quick one. Just wanted to applaud the executive team, Colin, for leading on, the rationalisation of the plans, because, it is difficult even as a board just to keep an eye on all the different things that we're doing. And so absolutely for the staff, for them to know we are doing just this, not all the myriad of things, I think will help and will help our productivity. So yes, please, more rationalisation too. Then on the other thing with the partnerships, that's great that's the first time that we're working really well that way with primary care. But we need to do more. One of my roles when I came on board was strategy and partnerships. And I think there is a lot that we can do in terms of partnership where we don't need to wait for commissioning, commissioning powers to do. That there are things in our power right now to do in terms of working with partners better that will actually improve our services to our patients, help us with our waiting list, and just, even help our staff on so many different things. So can we please do more, and then make sure that, we don't just dip our toes in, do a little bit and be satisfied that we've done that. There are lots of other areas where we need to do this.
Can I just come back to that?
Yeah.
So absolutely agree with that. And I guess just to reflect that, so I was with our thesis and strategic partners on Tuesday, looking at what's the next step of our relationship with them. And actually Dan came up with a brilliant idea, subject to us agreeing it later, but not later as in today, about actually, we've got some time over the board workshop agenda in May, and there's a real great slot where actually it was really making sense for one of our strategic VCC partners to actually come in and spend some time with us. So we thought that there's a real kind of sort of kudos there. So absolutely agree with you.
Questions? Yeah.
Part what Fiona mentioned, I see evidences a great deal of careful thought and hard work, and for that and so much more, we should be grateful. So thank you. My question, as we look back and reflect on where and why we fell short in delivery of the objectives last year, what thematic learning emerges that would help support improved delivery of what we see in front of us?
So I'll come in to start with, and then other people. So my view is that when we've looked at what we did last year, we didn't set the quantitative goals at the beginning. We had lots of TBCs, TBC, and therefore it's left a bit open. And so one of the things we're really clear about was we're going to set an objective that we know how we're going to measure it and what we're measuring from the beginning, and set the objective, not wait until Q1 to say, well, can we measure this? Because there were some questions as we went through the year about, well, is this the right measure and is it accurately measuring what we did? So we've done that work early on, learning from last year that it was a painful process that resulted us not being able to achieve the goal because we hadn't set a realistic goal and a realistic definition of the goal at the beginning of the year.
I think from my reflection on that, I think sometimes I think about how we did it last year when we were in a room together. I think there's a danger that we create an echo chamber as a board, and within that we often end up with a level of optimism bias. So if you colleagues may remember, we spent quite a long time talking about particularly the ED waiting times one. And actually, when you look at when we come onto it in the IQPR, it's the one that we are, we've got a huge program of work behind, but it's the one that we're furthest off track. I think what the step change that we've done differently this time is we've kind of sort of bounced the conversation between us as the board, but then we've taken it into the divisional teams that they've had the voice to be able to go, guys, that's right, but you're being way too overly optimistic in terms of our achievement. So actually, we've had that dialogue in a much better way this time than I think we've probably done previously. And I think what that does is it gives our senior leaders the ability to challenge that echo chamber that we kind of create, where we were all very optimistic, we're all impatient as board members, we all want better today, with the guys on the front line who actually have to be able to translate what we're saying into an actual delivery plan. So I hope we've done that better. Still room for improvement, but definitely a step forward from last time.
Okay, so we need to approve this as the annual plan. I think what we're saying is that we are definitely supportive, approving. Think that's an enormous amount of work. Can I just make one comment though, which is I think that there's still something which a big organisation such as this has a challenge of, which is communication. So when I think about this landing for staff, reading it, making sense of it, absorbing it, I think is still difficult, and I don't think it conveys the enthusiasm. I don't think it's possible to convey the enthusiasm and the ambition on paper, and would have been encouraging Dan to think about sort of more TikTok style, not saying it should be on TikTok, but video style communication. And I think somebody trying to explain this in 3 to 5 minutes and all of those sorts of things would be really, really important, and thinking about how we at each tier people are able to do it in their own way. So I think the work is brilliant, and it's we've moved so far. So it's how do we get people to feel as though they understand it and they can hear it, because it just feels so much better when people talk to you about it rather than on paper.
Completely agree. One of the things we've done in recent months is set up a staff reference group. We've got quite an eclectic mix of staff, clinical, non-clinical, different levels of seniority, both to explore how can we be better at getting the right information to you and engaging with you, but also to use it as a way to pressure test some of our messaging.
Yeah,
but we need to do more of it.
Brilliant. Great, thank you. We're only 13 minutes behind at the break point, which for me and my chairing is pretty good going, because but I think we've had important conversations, and I'm sure we'll catch the time up, or this is just a pre-warning, we might be shaving a bit of time off your lunch break. So we'll do our best to catch up. If we have 10 minutes now as planned, and thank you to everyone for really clear papers and good conversation. So if we just get started, and the first item is the integrated quality and performance report. So Usman, a report for assurance.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll give a brief overview of the month 10 IQPR, and then as ever, we'll go to exec colleagues who'll pick up their areas. So I think overall, it remains a mixed picture, I think it's fair to say, but one where I think the board can take some assurance that the right improvement work is now in place, and that there are some very clear signs that that's beginning to translate into better operation. And month 10, six of the strategic objective metrics were on target, including the 0 inpatient deaths where ligature was caused, achievement of core elements of the neighbourhood mental health teams, with making progress against the length of stay, work experience placements, and within the national planning, national and annual planning performance metrics. The majority of those are actually on track or ahead. We have got 5 where we are below target. I'm not sure what else. And across the organisational change programmes, I think there is only one that will end the year being delayed, which we talked about around Coombe Hospital. In terms of, I think it's important just to highlight there are really significant positive things to note as well within there. So let's sort of talk about suicide prevention. Following the agreed refinement of the measure to focus on linkage incidents causing moderate or severe harm that went through the quality committee. Trust is currently on track, 26% year-to-date reduction, 0 inpatient ligature accidents resulting in implementation of the NMHTs happened. EPR went live on the 2nd of Feb. While there will be a process of, we're currently in the process of stabilization, but as we move out of that, I think it's fair to say that's been a really significant achievement and largely done, I think, well, notwithstanding, as ever with these things, the challenges, but we had very minimal periods of discontinuity in that process. The system is working, still a lot of work to be done around making sure we want to get people to use it in the way we want to use it, rather than just seeing it as a direct placement. From just, I think, again, on the FRP program, we are at month 10, we were forecasting the delivery of that program in full, and we would deliver our break-even position. I don't want to jump down and give it away, but can tell that the year was ended. We did deliver all of those things. The main concerns, I think, remain through within the sort of set out in the IQPR, remain around flow and around our inpatient urgent care pathway. Waits for admission, we recognise, are still too high. And as at the month 10 report, as this was produced, our length of stay still remained above the target that we had set ourselves. And others will come in on the details. I guess what I will reflect on is that then clearly some of those metrics translate into our NOF position, which we know remains challenging. And I will re-emphasize, I think, though, that on the NOF position, it is in effect against 8 scoring metrics. One of those we know has got significant flaws that we have discussed with national teams around the CAMS access one, which was impacted by the Hampshires. And that's not to make excuses, but I think it's got to be seen in that context against some of the other metrics where we are doing.
Speak up a bit.
Oh, sorry. The other thing I guess I just will highlight quickly before I go to others is while the report is set out is based on the month 10 position, I think it's worth saying that it doesn't necessarily reflect where we are today. A lot of the work this year, as we have discussed in this board, has been about ensuring we've got all of the enabling works in place, that we have implemented the infrastructure, that we've got a really disciplined improvement process and program in place. And what I can say sort of position is that as we come toward the end of the year, clearly there are challenges in our data for the last 2 months of the year because of the implementation of the new EPR. So month 11 and 12 data, it's fair to say will require significant validation, and we will need to work through what that looks like. However, based on what we know at the moment, our length of stay position in March has substantially improved compared to where it was at the January position. It's now down. We think we will be almost at the target we had set ourselves. So in the January pack, it's reported at 59 days. We think the current position is actually 53.5, which is just about on the target we had set ourselves at the start of the year. The current number of 60+ day patients is reducing, and it's down, we think, now at the lowest level it's been in about 8 months. So again, a caveat to all of that, because we're recognising we have got a new EPR and data challenges, but done a lot of work to try and pull out core items. Because I think it's important to recognise we've got the NOF position as it is, we know the challenges, but the work that we have been doing, the plans that we set out, we are now delivering on them, and we're starting to see that come through. And I think linking it back to the 26-27 plan, they are the ones that form there. The work we are doing now should flow through sustainable improvement in those places. I will, I guess, leave it there. I'm happy to take questions on any other bits of it, but shall I do what I normally do, and we'll just quickly go to colleagues to cover off some of their key elements before we then maybe do 4 round of questions. So if I go to Claire first, just to touch on ligature and suicide.
Thank you. So Looking at slide 11, I'll take the slide as read. We can see that the overall number of inpatient visitors has fallen significantly in January. We did notice that there is a reduction in reporting of inpatient visitors. We've been taking that on the liaison with semester colleagues about the importance of reporting visitors. The good news there is that the moderate to severe harm visitors have remained stable over much of point. The suicide prevention dashboard is live on Power BI, so we have more accurate data about what is happening in terms of suspected suicides. What we did see was that the number of suspected suicides, sorry, I can't see it, was 19 in December. That did appear to be a spike. I have interrogated that data and I have talked to other people. Our public health colleagues do not think that it's a spike in December. They do not feel that there are any patterns of trend. What we also know is that the data on average would be considered managed by our legal department. We know that when we look at data over time, so we have looked at 21 to 24 data. We look at the raw data compared to coronial outcomes, that only approximately a third of the ones that we're recording as a suspected suicide, the coronial process will convert to suicide. So we know that we are appropriately cautiously over-reporting. So we do have some assurance that it does not go. That's good. Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy.
Because this is something about I think I'd love to take false assurance from that.
So,
I think there is complexity as well, because obviously coronial outcomes are more often, becoming more often a narrative outcome rather than a single word outcome as well. So yes, there's complexity in how we.
So, although I would say 4 years ago, the coronial definition changed. So it changed to make it that it's more likely to be made a suicide verdict than not. So that the definition changed and the burden of proof was removed. So we've seen nationally, we've seen an uptake in the number that are classified as suicide as a result. Now, I'm saying 4 years ago, it wasn't 4 years ago because I've been here 4.5 years, 6 years ago. 6 years ago, yeah. Yeah, yes, yeah.
And if we quickly go to John to cover off the next two items, and then we'll go to Fumi to cover off.
In terms of flow related.
Sorry, John, yeah.
Yeah, no problem at all. So you've heard us describe, I think, on a number of occasions, our approach to waiting times for admission, which covers a number of areas. And that covers length of stay, that covers clinically ready for discharge, it covers an alternative to admission. So I'm not going to rehearse the whole of the UEC transformation plan you've described already. I think the key points to draw out are, as Usman said, the data in the report only goes up until the end of January. Since January, the February and March information, we have seen an improvement in the average length of stay for adults, which is good news. We've seen a reduction in the number of patients on our hospital wards for over 60 days. Why 60 days? 60 days is the metric of which we are measured by NHS England for adults. For older adults, it's 90 days. We have seen a plateauing now around the number of patients clinically ready for discharge. I think it's fair to say, after having significant increase over the course of last summer, that is now feel like that has flattened out. When you look at it as a percentage, it's a high number. When you look at the length of the time that each of those patients remain in hospital, that is still far lower than it was. I think it's important for people to recognise in relation to the NOD metric around flow is only related to hospital discharge length of stay. If we discharge more people who've been in hospital for long periods of time, that will deteriorate. That is the right thing to do for those patients, particularly for those patients who don't need to be there because they need to receive their support in a different setting. So when we look at that metric, if you think it's going south, it may well be because actually we are taking the right action. So it's really important to see 2 or 3 of those numbers in the same space. Sorry to labour that, but I think you're not living this every day. You can often feel that a bit odd. Within the urgent care pathway section 136 numbers, so those patients who are detained by Sussex Police, those numbers in February were the lowest for 10 years. So that's really positive for those patients, and we're starting to see the improvements in our UEC improvement plan. I guess I'll just make one final point. There's lots of information in this report, and you will have seen the modelled impact of the actions that we've been sought to take. And I think we're starting to see the green shoots of those now. However, we've all been really clear that 4 or 5 of those actions sit in the SCLT. Those are the ones we want to focus on. If we want to see significant and quicker and long-term sustained change, there will need to be other actions as well, of which we are working with our ICB through this latest planning round, seeking to secure sort of recurrent investment for that. So it's a response in 2 parts: what we can do as an organisation, and then what we can do as a system. Simon, I'm happy to take lots of questions on any of that. I can talk about this all afternoon. Yeah.
Please don't. We're out of time.
Maybe that.
Just one very quick thing I just wanted to say on that 60-day length of stay that feeds into the NOP, and it's actually quite a big driver of it. I think the national team have finally listened and recognised it, because in what they have proposed as the next set of NOP metrics for next year, 2027, they have basically standard average length of stay target. So hopefully that will look through.
Just before we keep taking questions, through, except for me, and then we can come round to questions in the round. Is that okay?
Thank you, Chair. A quick one, because I know we started to talk about this earlier. So within the IQPR, the one that's worth mentioning is our sickness absence position. But I do think that our wider workforce indicators tell us a coherent story. So with our vacancy, turnover and agency trends moving in the right direction, we can see the sickness absence, particularly stress related, remaining quite stubborn. But that reflects a workforce that is stabilizing structurally, but recovering emotionally off the back of the significant programs of organizational change that we have had in the last 3 years. I do want to be able to ground that in some context. So even though our sickness absence is high, it's important to note that we are within the range for the sickness absence range for all of the Southeast. So we are lower than the average sickness absence for the entire region, which is currently 6.7%. So I just wanted to ground that in that context. Also within our workforce indicators, our people indicators, there are a total of 21 people indicators that should give us an idea of where we are organizationally. 14 out of those 21 are green or amber. So when we think about where we are in terms of the areas of challenge, it is less than a third. So it's just important to put that contextually, because that then has an impact on the work that we're doing to support our people. But specifically around sickness absence, we do have strong controls in place, cleaner, better divisional data, training, as well as targeted support for the teams where the stress indicators are the highest, and that's being tracked monthly. So we are expecting to see that tail off to test the impact of the interventions that we're putting in place. But I just wanted to, because this is important, also because it's a board meeting, I wanted to ground that in the knowledge that what we are seeing in SPFT is a symptom of what is happening within the system as a whole, in light of how organizations are responding to organizational change.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for me. So we've got Anil, Abiola, Kathy, and Cheryl.
Kathy's before me. So.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay,
We looked at the data before, we told them one day to see that actually 2.7 going. We did pretty well, actually, we benchmarked pretty well on that. It took longer to see the something that. And so there's something about this caution or something about the clinical decision making. we know if we've shrunk that between?
Yeah, so I think we, do you have me to come back in on question by question? Yes, so I think we have. So we look at the number of patients who have an extended length of stay, who are not clinically ready for discharge. Because again, what's within our gift, people are not clinically ready for discharge, because actually it's about treatment plan, obviously it's for the medical fraternity, but it's about treatment plan, it's around risk thresholds, it's around engagement support from our community teams. This did not all just sits within the purview of our inpatient service. And then there's the group who are ready to go to our ongoing support accommodation or sort of care or whatever it might be. So our focus has been very much on the patients who are not clinically ready for discharge. So yes, I think we can evidence that. But when you obviously, in terms of the national numbers, it's all lumped in together. So that's why it's so important for us to provide the company's narrative.
Thanks, John.
Especially a quick question. Claire, you helped me set out earlier the suspected suicides you think are being over-reported. Earlier in our conversation, John, you helped me set out the contacts are being under-reported. Because what I take from that, amongst other things, is what if and only if and when we ameliorate this issue, will we truly know as an organisation whether we're journeying towards those strategic objectives we set ourselves? I suppose in another way, and seeing through another prism, as a board member, we talked about well-led board assurance, and I think it's fair to say that uncertainty in any organisation, especially one such as this, delivering care to other human beings, it's less than helpful. Question, if I could, I'm not taking away from anything other than others have said. If we step back and take objective view of the whole IQPR, I think it portrays performance where there are notable areas of improvement, there are pockets of excellence, but equally at the same time, there are areas that are fragile, and we see fragile, inconsistent performance, and some areas of persistent underperformance. I think if that is a fair and accurate appraising, my question is, what does that inform us about the extent to which our transformation initiatives have actually taken hold, and the investment in CQI delivery? Are we getting the return on investment as yet that we hope for?
Shall I start with the CQI bit maybe? And then, so CQI is a journey and we've only just started it. So I'd say that we've invested, we haven't seen a return yet because we haven't embedded it and we haven't started the programme. So I see that as our long-term vision and our long-term cultural change that will fix this. But we're in this bit at the minute, I was talking about it yesterday actually, where we're on the CQI journey, but we've also got to improve at the same time. And there's a risk of using old style of improvement methodology whilst trying to introduce new style of improvement methodology. I think one of the things that is really going to help us with this is the targeting on those, what we had in the last paper, the really clear objectives for next year, and using the CQI methodology and driving rather than trying to do a field of many flowers blooming and trying to do everything, which is I think what we've historically tried to do. But
I think I was good. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think when we started the CQI process, I think they were very clear. We've been clear with all the learning is it's somewhere between a 5 and 10 year journey for the organisations who've done this and done it well. There is no one who's sort of started it and then it's immediately sort of delivering. I think what I would add is recognising that we've still tried to tailor it, where we're going to launch it and which teams we pick and what pathways, and try and focus those against those areas where we know we've got challenges. To your main point, I mean, if we just call it out, the really sticky bits of our challenge when it comes to, if we look at it from an IQPR or metrics point of view, has been around the flow and the urgent care pathway. So those are the 3 or 4 ones that have been difficult, not just this year, last year, for a period of time. We've put a lot of investment, time and effort has gone in this year to building the infrastructure improvement capacity. And Claire can talk maybe, give some real world examples of what we've actually changed, what is happening on the ground today. And while it is very early, I think the flash numbers that we're seeing out of February and March are starting to indicate that there is real improvement, that change is now starting to happen. John's point about, well, how do we make it sustainable? A key part of how we make it sustainable is ensuring that we have effectively been commissioned in the right way to cover all of those senses. And that's the active conversation I have with the commissioners. But I think it's taken us, it's fair to say, a bit of time to really accurately understand and diagnose the problem, and then put in place the required amount of infrastructure to ensure we can deliver the change. And I think that's what we'll, the proof of that will be as we go through 26, 27.
I think that's the really important bit, isn't it? Are those actions the right actions? And we can see that continued sustained improvement. Abiola and Joe, can I take your questions together and then see who wants to respond, and some of us we move on to the next.
Mine's, I love this paper, by the way. Like, I also struggle with how to deal with it as a NED, because there are so many questions, but this is a generic question. It's probably for you as Minister, kind of the overarching author. We're looking at month 10 data. All of your verbal updates have been what's been going on in February and March. You probably knew a week ago when the papers were submitted. Is there a way that we can, perhaps over the course of the next 12 months, particularly with System 1 and others, where we can move to our data just being a bit closer to the moment in time? Because it's April, that was January.
So I will just say this is an active and live conversation. So there are certain statutory requirements we have to comply with. Our formalised board report has to be based on our validated submitted MHDS data, which unfortunately is a very long time lag. So in effect, our January reported data isn't actually sort of confirmed as validated and submitted until like mid-March in effect, which is why we have this lag. The conversation we're having is recognizing that we still have to do that. Should we be producing some sort of very high level flash report, and where would we take that with that? It probably wouldn't be appropriate to do that in part 1, but maybe that's a part 2 conversation.
Can we leave that one with you?
Yeah, leave it with you.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got 2 points. One about the clinically ready for discharge. Now, John, you mentioned something about how it plateaued, that we'd had some improvement, now plateaued. And I do remember we had at one of the boards someone who was talking about the housing project, which I know that was really successful. Did it plateau because we're now not doing that as much, or we've done the most that we can do with that project, or all these other people who can go home, it's not a housing related issue, is one question. Then going on to patients waiting more than 12 hours for that 98% versus the 5% is really scary, and I'm sure that it must be really quite scary to to everyone else. So I think my question kind of is like, I know there's lots of activity going on. What happens when, at what stage do we say that's not working? Is there some sort of timeline when we're like, we're doing all of this stuff, but this is really sticky, it's not working? What is our process for that? And then, or it's working in some areas and not, and if it's not working in those areas, what's our process for that? Because we can't have all these different programs that we're constantly doing, pouring money, time, energy and everything in, and it's still sticky, which means that's an indicator that something's just not working, that we're doing great stuff, but they're not achieving the impact at the end of the day. We're just doing a lot of delivery.
Listen, you take briefly.
So I think what we're now calling the UEC improvement plan, which consolidated a lot of existing programs, and we tried to consolidate and streamline, take out something. That program's only really been kicking off since November, so I think it's too early. And that plan very explicitly had the trajectory going all the way through to 2028. It showed for each of the core 5 actions that SPFT is solely responsible for, what the trajectory for delivery is over the next, in effect, 18-month period. And so I think that's what we're monitoring against. That's how we're taking assurance about, is it doing what it said it was going to do? The element about whether it can be sped up and whether we can get improvement faster is the conversation we're having with commissioners, because that plan also set out action 6, 7 and 8, which were very much about, this is what commissioners will have to do, and we'll effectively a faster set of improvement. So to answer your question, I think it's too soon to say these aren't working. We've gone through a very complicated process to work out what we should be doing, and we are now doing it. We have a trajectory that we have to now hold. I think there's a discipline to saying we said it was going to take 18 months. We now have to follow that and make sure that we're delivering against that trajectory. The actions that will get the faster improvement are live conversations with the commissioners.
Okay, can we take it into the lunchtime break? I'm really conscious that there are lots of detail in this. I think there's probably a lesson in here, isn't there, to your point, which is there are lots of questions that could come up. Which ones of those are inquisitive and we can have outside, and which ones should be in the room as ones that we need to drive? John, I'm going to give you the last sentence because I can see that you're not going to let me have the last one. Okay.
Just looking at the metric around 12-hour percentage is to remember our starting point. Starting point was an average of around 6 days per person waiting to come into hospital. But you say, if you look at it just on 12 hours, every breach of that is going to look like we haven't achieved anything. So we could move the dial on that to 4 days, 3 days. It's a very significant improvement. However, it would still look like 0%. You answered your own question on the other one. It was the last sentence that you said in terms of those people are not waiting for housing. The work that we're doing around general needs housing has been great and successful and continued. People waiting for service provision by social care. I'll talk to you more about that outside.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. And sorry to rush, but we have got a lot still to get through. Welcome, Jackie, freedom to speak up report. Sorry for keeping you waiting. As always, you can assume that the report has been read, but if there's anything that you would like to just point our attention to, but quite keen if there are questions to move to the questions quickly, so that people have the chance to ask you anything. But is there anything you wanted to shine a light on for us?
I just wanted to highlight the learning from the staff survey. There's quite a lot of learning from us. Sadly, things are going in the wrong direction. And we're seeing, if you look at division, that things were year on year particularly poor in terms of the confidence to speak up and down more than other areas. But I suppose the bit that's shouting out is 2.1, which is question 25F. Which is, do you feel that the organisation will address any concern that they raise? Concern that only 4 in 10 staff think that. And I think the learning from some of the national reports in comparison is that I think that whilst there's fear around speaking up, I think futility is probably the strongest communication from staff as to why they don't speak up either to me or to you. And this probably is a surprise to people. So I'll let people ask me questions because there might be some discussion. There's a lot of work to do.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Jackie. Dinesh.
Thanks very much. Really helpful report. I'm going through 2.1.7, which is where staff were told not to report to sort of higher managers, because whenever I do site visits, I make it very clear that if they want it to be confidential, it will be confidential. Otherwise, I'm happy to feed back to. So how do we change that culture where people feel free? I mean, obviously, immediate line managers were feeling somewhat threatened, perhaps.
Yeah, I think there were shortages in line management in that team. That they had vacancies and it was hard to attend to everybody. And so I think there was an attempt to sort of stop people from asking for more. But I try to use these descriptive things because it's partly aimed as well at the other committees I bring it to just illustrate some of the principles and just remind people that anyone can go straight to Jane or to you, or that they don't have to go through the pecking order, but particularly for lower grade staff, I think often people are thinking if this is happening, that that somehow it's always the manager, your admin manager you go to, not the team manager, and actually there's no rules to say that, and I think it's really important that people can. So I think illustrating these stories, it's not that it's happening everywhere, it's just an isolated example, but it illustrates the story for staff to learn.
What do you think we should be doing as a board?
People ask me these impossible questions. There is a strong feeling of powerlessness around, and I don't think it's just on the front line. And I wish I had all the answers, because people are competent and I think often people know what needs to happen. And yet there is this gap between what we want to do and know we could do, but what we do. And I feel it myself sometimes, and I don't know what's got into this, to be honest. I really wish that it would be nice, wouldn't it, if you could say there's 3 people at the top who to blame if we just got rid of them. But I don't feel that, fortunately. But that's not my experience. You know, it would be so easy to have that kind of answer, but there's a lot of good people trying really hard at every level at the moment. And yet there is this gap to action. And if you're someone like me and make yourselves trying to get the action, it's also very frustrating because people are not getting that. So I don't have the answers.
Yeah, you know, this goes back to a point that I just made sometimes about how we're doing a lot of actions. So I can see, because you know, you do come and you do talk to us about Speak Up, and I can see that there's lots of processes that we're doing, but clearly the data is showing something else. So for me, I think there is stuff that we can do from the top, and it's like from us sort of thinking about what is it that makes people feel that the trust isn't going to act on their concerns, and I think that does come from the top. And I wonder if there's more that we need to think about how do we deal with people when an issue is raised that shows compassion in how we deal with people and shows that we took them seriously enough to make something happen. And so I think if people are not seeing that we are dealing with a problem effectively, they're not going to come up. So it doesn't matter how many sessions or how much communication that we do. Yeah, they're just like, oh, is that what you're saying, really? But actually, I told you X, Y, Z. This person is still in post and is still causing me a problem. You know, so you know, I do think there is something about we need to let people see that we've actually done something as opposed to just put processes in place, 1. But then 2, also, there's got to be, you know, we do talk about having a no blame culture and being compassionate. We have to make sure that we do have that balance where we do something, but even when we do something, that we do it compassionately, you know, and just thinking sometimes about, is the way that we, I don't know, ask someone to move posts because they weren't fit for that post, are we doing that in a compassionate way? And if we're not doing that in a compassionate way, people are not going to put their hands up and say, actually, you know what, I messed up. Because if they feel that we sort of throw the book at them and sort of leave them to hang and dry, they're not going to do it. And so I think there is something for us, Dinesh, going to your question, as a board and for the leadership team, the executive. How are we actually dealing with some of these issues? And can we, hand on our heart, say we've done it in the most compassionate way? Are we asking people who have gone and getting someone saved, ask them, how was that process for you? Sometimes we might have to ask someone else to do that, and then genuinely listen to what they say.
Were you going to respond to Abiola's point, Cheryl? The last question, Colin, you wanted to.
Yeah, I guess just sort of building on it, because I think there's something for me about, Becky and I have talked about it kind of quite a lot around, we focus quite a lot on trying to encourage the speaking up culture in terms of encouraging people to be able to speak up, of which freedom to speak up is one element of that. So there's a bit of triangulation in the report between what's that overall culture in the organisation about speaking up to whoever, about whatever, and then the specifics experience through that sort of the freedom to speak up sort of structure itself. We've talked a bit ago about, actually, I think there's almost a bit about how do we help people to feel able to speak up, but or as importantly, sorry, actually, how do we help people to feel safe when they are spoken up to? So actually, what's the support that we give managers? We're talking about potentially bringing the the new deputy guardian roles in to be able to do that. So actually, if someone's spoken up to me as the manager in the team, how do I manage this in a way that's really compassionate, non-defensive? I don't feel threatened by it, because I think that's an absolute point. And actually what I'm able to do is to respond to it quickly and transparently, because quite a lot of the feedback that we get is that people speak up, but they don't get the response in a timely sort of way. So I think there's 2 sides to it. There's the how do we speak up and create the culture where people feel safe to do that, but actually how do we also create a culture where line managers, team leads, whoever it is, feel safe and able to respond to it properly.
Cheryl.
So I think this paper with the staff survey responses in is a proxy around culture. And this is where we'll see the check. If we're doing things right, we will see a change in this paper year on year. I want to put Claire on the spot, if you don't mind. So obviously you're new, but from a clinical perspective, you're holding a really senior position in the organisation and you're still working clinically. Could you give us some insight on this paper in terms of how it feels for you as a clinician on the ground?
I'll just be clear, Claire's not new. She's been here for many.
No, I said.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I see what you mean. I thought, so sorry. I thought I misheard.
One, but as the clinician in the room who is doing work on the ground and who's seeing it, what's your perspective? What advice would you give?
So I think. So I work in a very specialist service that has an associate clinical director, so I'm not a full being, because I'm very privileged to work on a board that's very well staffed, that has stable leadership, that has all of the things that we would aspire to, that make speaking up easier. So I'm not sure from my clinical work, if I'm honest, I'm very lucky, but I'm not sure that I can give you the insight that you're.
Neil, and then I'm going to Kathy and then George to close.
It's a responsibility of this board clearly to find answers to otherwise impossible conundrum. So I take your point, Fabiola.
Speak up, Neil, please.
Sorry. From my experience in the anthology of high performing commercial organisations, there's one feature that consistently presents itself, and it's this. And it's not a silver bullet, it's the visibility of the senior leadership team. And I suppose what I would implore consideration around is how and how quickly our senior leadership team might become more visible. Do away with as many of those otherwise important, ostensibly important meetings that you have in your diary, and get out there, be in front of our teams, listen to them as you will do, I know, with an empathetic ear, because I think that will go some long way, even if the actual issue still exists.
Thanks, Neil. Kathy, just the last.
Something we have more development. So I think that does speak to the wider culture of this, but how do you respond when it's not definitely listen to what you say, sure that would be.
So I just want to say thank you, Jackie. This is a really helpful report, and I know it's not easy bringing difficult messages to a board, and I know that you have felt this very personally, and I do appreciate that, but I also want to reiterate what Colin said. It's everyone's responsibility, and it's us to lead this, not for you to lead this, but you are part of the leadership in this. But I wanted to say thank you because you're holding a really tricky and something that I know impacts you personally because you care. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, from all of us. Brilliant. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I think you were talking more about accountability. And I don't think the problem is too nice. I think we have to also be thinking about, you know, if we ask people to do things that they should be doing, like work with an employer, what do you do when they don't? You know, and actually we can do that kindly, but I think there's something about actually being a bit firm that's missing. The action is like, okay, we asked, but now what? You know?
Yeah.
And so I think that I'm hearing that. I think also we can also give out quite a lot of mixed messages. And sometimes I even read things that say, thank you for speaking up and you've done the right thing. And then it says something that's pretty much saying, don't speak up, you know, and I think we all do it. And I think we just need to be careful at sort of the mixed messages we can sometimes hear. And trying to think what the important things. I think when people get concerned, they think they're complaints. And they keep getting mixed up, and so they start reacting like with anxiety. Oh God, I've got a complaint. What are we going to do? And what's the deadline? And you know, whereas actually it's meant to be feedback. It's meant to be useful, and no one's looking at that. They just want to let you know something. So how we change that culture, I think, is again people listening to. So.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. I'm sorry we don't have more time, but thank you very much for the report. Thanks, Kathy. Okay. So I'm going to move very swiftly on to the quality committee hold on, report. So over to you, Lynn.
Paper setting out what we discussed and where we got to. So I won't carry on. So in terms of the evolution of the committee, it was the last committee that will be the single committee that deals with people and greater time and the opportunity to discuss more around the things that much like this. I would like to just raise one or two things here. The first is the issue that we had where we wanted to look and see with regard to the number of mixed sex wards that we have in patients. And so we wanted to see if there were any things that we should be concerned about in terms of exploitation or sexual harassment or anything at all that particular gender would be at risk or is experiencing care in a different way. And what's interesting is that if you look at other services in other parts of the country, they've done away mostly with, not all, but mostly with single, combined sex wards because of the risk to patients and particularly male violence to women. And what came back, as you can see here, was something that was interesting. So there were no complaints or feedback. Now that you might feel very heartened by that, and I think the committee was not. There's something going on around that. Whether it's people not recording, not feeling confident about recording, not understanding. I doubt it that there are no incidents at this time. If this is right, that's great. But I doubt it. So I think that's something that might be looked at to get a kind of true reflection of what's going on the mixed sex wards for patients. Then the next is around the provider collaborative quality reports. So you will remember, I'm sure, from the press that St Andrews, which is a private provider of mental health care up and down the country, had a number of concerns raised about it, such that the national team who commissions mental health, particularly at the high secure end, not the high secure, but the higher secure end, and patients with long-term conditions, decided that they would not continue with the national funding of the contract. And so people now are repatriating patients away from those contracts and into new ones. But there were some quite interesting questions came up for us because we are a provider. We have a provider of services, sorry, a commissioner of services, as well as a provider of services. And so works commence now to look at how did we, when I say we, I'm people who were commissioning the services, not just us. How did people not know what was going on with their patients that were being cared for in these kinds of services? And there will be more in other providers, but also not just that, but to try to think about how we repatriate them, and also develop quality standards that we can have where we engage with people who are in far-flung places, saying, how is your care? How is your treatment? Do you have any concerns? This is the date you might be able to attend to your local patch. This is the care plan that might get you there. So not just have people gone, but actually really engaging with them and hearing about their experiences in those placements, because there wasn't anything or any way that those service users could speak up. So I just wanted to raise those two things because they said they were important.
Great, thank you very much, Lynn. Are there any questions that anybody has? I think it all good. I think it's great to know. I think that the quality and people will be divided. So both, that the agendas become manageable within both of those, and that due attention. We have got to formally approve both the Guardian Safe Working Hours Quarterly 3 report and the pay gap reports, which are in the appendices as well. So just to
I know we need to formally approve them, and the data is the data, but I do think we need to take this to the People Committee because the ongoing disparities are something that we should shine a light on.
Yeah.
So I think that's an action for us to take.
Yeah. So, John.
Back on the issue you raised around mixed gender awards. I appreciate this isn't the quality committee, but I just thought we should just sort of cover some of that off.
Briefly, John.
Very brief. So when we changed the ward configuration of Millview Hospital, which was in the last 18 months, the organisation did a review of mixed sex accommodation guidance and policy, did some of the work that you described and looked at national benchmarking on what is best practice. I think it's fair to say that there is both sides of the fence, aren't there? You're saying evidence based for single gender awards and evidence based for mixed sex. That includes the quality impact assessments, conversations with the CTC and the ICB. This is not to say it is perfect, but we have both in the organisation, mixed gender awards and single gender awards, so we can seek to accommodate patients' preference and we move people around and be appropriate for them to do so. Appreciate it's a longer conversation, but just want to look at that reassurance to.
I think over the years, there's been, different ways of looking at it, but women are vulnerable in mixed sex environments, and same with the vulnerable men are as well. And I do think there is choice in there, but there's also a need, I think, sometimes to protect.
So this one, which will obviously be for further discussion at Quality Committee, along with the reports, but we'll formally note the reports and then the actions that arise from them be picked up by the People Committee. Okay, brilliant, thank you. For the next paper, which is around the safe staffing establishment annual review, we've got a bit which we will talk about in private committee, but given Mandy is new and we need Chief Nursing Officer to look at it, we're not going to talk about the paper in this meeting. So we've only got 5 minutes, doesn't do it justice. Mandy hasn't had time to review it, so we will bring it across to the next bit when we've had a bit more time in order to take that properly, and then we'll pick up some bits in the committee later. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So Anil, over to you to Finance and Investment Committee, please.
See the basis for Stephen read Chair's report, the accompanying month 11 finance paper and the slide deck. I don't propose to recite any parts of those, but
I'll ask you to speak up a bit again. Yeah, it's me, sorry.
To the key issue sheet 13.1, and secondly, the executive summary in the slide deck. Galloping through issues, there are no new or emerging risks at committee that were disclosed. Our cash position remains strong. There's no forecast pinch point that we can't cover in the next 3 to 6 months, and our number of liquidity days is positive. Debtors and creditors remain within the trust policies and otherwise reasonable. And in terms of our balance sheet, we're not anticipating needing to review our accruals or indeed our provisions made. The centrepiece of discussion was around the financial plan for the next 3 years. Some context. In 2023-24, the underlying structural deficit that was a legacy of decisions over many prior years was about £53 million. The trust entered 25-26 with a break-even plan supported by 33.8 million of savings or FRP. At the end of February this year, the trust had delivered 29.2 million of that plan and is on target to deliver the remainder. And for the exit deficit going into this year is 13.5 million. So 53 down to 13.5. The fact, and dare I say it's a very significant feat that should be both applauded, but also recognise that it's not without consequence, especially burden carried by our teams to deliver that. Colleagues will know well that the clear prescription of NHS Trust is to deliver financial balance and very heavy consequences, not just in terms of finance, but also governance in failing to do that. Acknowledging this, the Trust has 3-year financial plan submitted to NHS to deliver a break-even position in each of the next 3 years. It's noteworthy that the savings, that will require savings this year, 24.9 million, next year, 13.9 million, and the year after, 8.3 million. But another way, it equates to 5.6%, 3.1%, and 1.9% forecast annual income, respectively. I'd also like to draw the board's attention to the required savings this year, 24.9 million. The Trust already has identified 21.8 million of that, although it's true to say approximately 11.3 million has been assessed as possessing high risk of non-delivery. Looking at the budget and for general assurance, in my estimation, the preparation and arriving at this budget appears to be fastidious, and that should be applauded and congratulated. The budget has been stress tested in terms of internally for different scenarios. The underlying assumptions appear to be reasonable. Inflationary uplifts seem to be fair and indeed are in accordance with national guidance in any event. The downside risk of delivering the FRP upon people and quality of care delivered and indeed the scope of services we're able to deliver has been considered through the lens of E and QIA, as you would expect, but nonetheless it's important to point that out. That's all I have to say. Any questions?
Thanks, Neil. Did you say you had a question? That's the sign of a very good summary.
Or one that was like too opaque.
Very good. So,
there's lots of organisations having this discussion, not just in health, but for all the systems that we rely on and depend on. And I know that the people here working are incredibly flexible in the way that you're able to apply particular rules to get through to where we need to be in terms of reporting. And I just want to go back through that quality lens again, where you look at the IHI triangle, where you see drive up quality, drive down cost, and improve the health of your local population. And that those three things absolutely sit together.
Yeah.
And that they're not at odds with each other.
Yeah.
They're complementary. And it's going back to how we support our staff as well, if I could bring that in, is if we can articulate that this is not like some huge slice of awfulness. It's an opportunity, and I know you probably already do this, but for the board to be really well cited on that this is an opportunity to do things in a different way and a better way, to work closely with listening and hearing what our local communities want, so that they can take part in making it more efficient, etc. It's the only way to do it, and we just have to carry on. If that's what we're doing, and I believe it is, that's what we've got to carry on doing.
And I sit on the committee, and I think that there is never a conversation which happens where quality isn't part of that conversation. It is a really impressive mix in there, and I think that we do have that. I guess my only thing I would say is that there is transformation, there is improvement, and sometimes I have to say, and we can't do something, and that's one of the bits which I think is part of our ongoing conversation. But yeah, absolutely, I think it is one of the joys of sitting on a finance committee is in that one where you have got genuinely the different contributions. It is never just a money conversation. So, okay, Great, thank you very much, Anil. And then, okay, over to you, John, for the emergency preparedness, resilience and response. Oh, sorry, I've missed that one. Oh, sorry, Nitin, John, not you. False start.
Thanks, Simon.
There was a kick under the table, no one saw.
Thanks, Simon. I will be quick. I know we've got 5 minutes. I will take the report as read. There are no issues to be escalated to the board. Just a couple of things to highlight. We received 2 final reports from internal audit around board assurance and risk framework audit and the payroll audit. Both of them received reasonable assurance with positive findings overall. We had a few audits that were delayed, mainly around IT assets and waiting list due to a number of reasons, but they will come back on track. We approved the internal audit plan and noted that patient flow is one of those areas we want to come back to next year and see how we incorporate that into the internal audit plan. External audit, we have work commencing in about 4.5 weeks, the main external audit field work. Year-end timelines have been agreed, including the audit clearance meeting and national submission scheduled for the 26th of June. Aside from that, I have nothing major to report on, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Nitin. Any?
May I just add one point with Nitin's permission, if I may? I think committee also received assurance on annual report planning, and that was very well received and commented from external audit perspective. So just wanted to put that for the board, that it's on track, on delivery, and good assurance from external auditors.
Great. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Now it's you, John.
Emergency planning. So every year we have to bring a report to the board around the outcome of the court standards process around emergency planning. So what does that mean? So integrated care boards have to assure themselves that each of the provider organisations in their patch are meeting compliance around NHS England core standards for emergency planning, resilience and response. But there are 58 core standards that we have to meet. We're fully compliant with 31, we're partially compliant with 22, and we were found to be non-compliant with 5. What does that mean for us? So for the 25, that means we've moved to being non-compliant overall from a position of substantially compliant. The gaps for us were around an annual report for last year and around exercising. So in effect, putting in place exercises to ensure that our emergency planning processes are robust, business continuity management and preparedness. The feedback that we have had is that operationally, on a day-to-day basis, we don't believe that we hold a significant level of risk, and the feedback that we've had from different partners and ICB colleagues is the same. For example, the feedback that we've had around managing our ongoing management of medical industrial action is solid. Our response to requests for winter plans, for example, is solid. This is more around the long-term governance challenge around our compliance around a number of emergency planning standards. We have had a very significant workforce challenge in this area, which we've now sought to rectify. So what actions are we taking to resolve the situation? So we've recruited a new head of emergency planning who starts in 3 weeks' time. We've recruited her from the ICB. In fact, she has been a long-standing assurer of our commission, so that's a very strong appointment. We've had a temporary leave in place for the last few months. We've developed an improvement plan that moves us, as we see in the paper, that projects to move us back to partial compliance in year 1 and then full compliance in 3 years. We would hope to obviously bring that forward. The reason we've been cautious is we are expecting there to be new standards introduced by NHS England in 2027. We don't quite know what they'll look like yet. If they're not particularly material, then of course we will bring that timeline forward. We have already increased our business continuity plans. We're now over 50% compliant in that area. We've set a timeline through the exec committee for completion of all of those by August. The final point I would say is we've also added this to our internal audit plan for 27, 28 primarily, because actually doing it in 26, 27, but we sort of typically because we're going to be working on the improvement plan, and we'd actually therefore want to audit the fruits of our labour rather than actually tell us something that we already know. So in summary, Simon, we've moved down the ratings to non-compliant. Operational risk and management of immediate business continuity issues is comfortable. We can evidence that through the report. We have some gaps in our governance and training, particularly. We've got a lead in place starting from the beginning of next month, and we have an improvement plan detailed and developed and shared with our ICB colleagues, and we discussed this since our last provider assurance meeting.
Can I just ask one question for opening up? Did we expect to be non-compliant? Was this a surprise to us?
Not
okay. Did I see a hand?
Do we do exercises? You know, do you hold like something catastrophic has happened somewhere, go and deal with it?
So that's been the greatest area of challenge in our compliance, is actually having a programme of work to do those exercises. The last significant exercise we did actually was probably about 18 months ago at Helling Life at Health Forensic Services, but it shows that for the obvious reason, where we've been having one of the greatest challenges to put in place an evacuation. So the first task for our new lead would be ensuring that we have the training plans and our exercise plans up and running. In effect, you can have a business continuity plan, it can just sit on the shelf. It's about actually the abundance of it and actually implementing it if necessary.
As a board, we're now holding this that we're non-compliant, and my assumption would be that you would expect to come back in a year's time, but I just wonder whether we need to bring that forward, because the accountability for this sits with us.
Yeah.
So obviously you've got a new starter joining, maybe at the 6-month mark rather than the year mark, because of the risk that's contained within the paper. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. Just in terms of the annual, so we won't see a change in our rating, as it were, until the annual compliance takes place.
Perhaps we could self-assess ourselves.
Do a progress report.
I thought on the same point to show, I thought the health thing, because it's now going through the audit committee and it's getting the scrutiny audit. I think that's really audit was the first really important. They will have more time to keep the towers on. We might hear, but I would absolutely support it coming back in 6 months of the progress report. But I think strengthening the governance around it from our perspective is a helpful thing to do. So it's really good to see that recommendation in the report. I mean, I think it is what it is. I'm assured by what you told us, and I think strengthening the governance is that.
Just a quick point to emphasize the point Kathy has made. The responsibility for governance lies with the audit committee. So the rightful thing to do is for audit committee to ask for the leads to do a deep dive report through committee to this board, rather than this board having a direct view then through the annual report.
Yeah. And I guess while I wouldn't want it to be a laboured and detailed report, it feels as though even 6 months, we should know what's happening on a quarterly basis whilst it's being improved. Just so that comes through the audit committee would be my preference, because 6 months can feel like a long time. But just short, sharp. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so organisational governance review.
Thank you so much. I won't take very long, maybe a couple of minutes. Just to firstly acknowledge a lot of work has gone into looking at what our current governance looks like. Quick wins were firstly to acknowledge the setup of the new People Committee, which People and Culture Committee, let me get this right. And I think that's a recognised win that we should really celebrate. But more importantly, to recognise some of the changes within the membership. They all have been gone through a lot of review. People have looked at it and people have thought through what they mean. What I would probably ask this board is, if I may please take your permission, there are small changes, of course, sadly with Lynn leaving and thankfully for Mandy coming on board, a few subtle changes to make. If I can do that outside the board with that approval, if you can approve those in terms of reference for the committees to be established in the new form. All the details about the reporting structures, how the new wiring diagram looks like, what they are intending to do is all captured in there. we still have a chance as we go through our annual effectiveness review to make further changes that will come back to this board in summertime. Thank you.
Great, Tim. Okay.
Yeah, we can, yeah, or we can do it outside, it's fine, yeah.
Fine. That's great.
Okay, so we're approving the terms of reference, and then, but we're recognising that there might be some membership points which will be addressed outside. There's nothing substantive that we need to. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Is there any other business from anybody? Can I just say an enormous thank you, Lynn, for your duty, time, service, contribution. I personally remember the first time that I heard you speak, and I just thought, wow, this is somebody we need to listen to. That we need to listen to, and I think that has been true in every meeting, workshop that I've been in. Your way of thinking, looking challenging in a way, challenging thinking, has been, has made a real difference to my experience of being in meetings. So thank you. We will miss you, and we will maybe give you something in the private meeting. But for now, just wanted to acknowledge in the public meeting your our thanks to
And Sean and Nitin are clapping, so there you go.
So can I just respond and say thank you very much to everybody here, and also to all the governors as well for giving me the opportunity to coming here in the first place. And what a joy it's been, really. And some parts of it, not my use of technology has not been fun at all. But I leave you with the questions unanswered that I bring. But I brought at the beginning, which was, do you know what kind of leaders you want to be? Are we a truly learning organisation? And the other one was, are we do we have a blame-free culture? Lots of discussions today made me think no to all three of them. We're not really clear. And I think that's still important work to be done. So either people need to say, well, actually, we don't agree with that, or just say, well, we do, and we need to get round to it. Or somewhere in the middle lies the truth. But not being every time to ask it when people then kind of look at you and don't say much is a bit demoralising. So I think, and the only reason I say these things is because I've been in places, and Colin, you have as well, when people thought about what did kindness mean to a team of senior executive directors. How did that transform the organisation? All of that stuff, but you're not giving yourself airspace for it or time for it, and I think it's still there waiting to be released.
And you just demonstrated exactly what I said in my introduction. So thank you, Lynn, and thank you all very much. So we will start the next meeting at 1:30.